Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm really happy for you to get to know today Andrea Rotondo. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi, Gordon. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, and so today we're going to be talking about bookkeeping and a little more about how we can maybe make that not so scary for people and just thinking about our numbers and all of that sort of thing. But Andrea, as I start with everyone, tell folks more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
Yes, I love to share that story. So I'll give you the really summarized version of that. Many years ago, my plan was to actually be like one of you guys, the listeners, a therapist. And after a few changes here and there, and life happens, I shift that direction into accounting and bookkeeping and all sorts of things related to money. And I knew before I even launched my business almost 5 years ago that I wanted to serve this community in a way. It felt like I owed that to the space and to the people. And of course, nobody was telling me that, but it was this internal pressure of I want to give back to this.
Mhm.
So I decided that this was going to be the my clients that I wanted to serve, therapy practice owners.
Yes, yes. Well, let's go. I'm so glad you're here, and I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. So, yeah. So, I guess to start out with, when you think about maybe the difficulty that you've learned that therapists have with bookkeeping and kind of the scary nature of it, what comes to mind for you? And yeah, how can we make it simpler?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand where we are and and acknowledge the fact that, well, if I feel nervous or if I feel scared, it's probably because, and at least in my clients, a lot of them come without that experience of business, for example, or business school or classes regarding accounting. That's not a lot. There's not a lot of experience when it comes to that. So launching your own practice feels very overwhelming when it comes to the finances because again, there's not a lot of experience in that area. But unfortunately, to run a business, you do need to pay attention to the finances. You can't ignore that, at least not
Right.
forever, right? We do that, especially in the beginning. We kind of like put it off, but then there's going to be a point where you're going to have to come face to face with that. And if you let that time pass by for longer and longer, then that's going to become even bigger and scarier
Mhm.
in a way because you're not going to be looking at things when they're still in the baby steps, we're adjusting. It's already a grown business. You're making money. You might have even people in your team and starting to look at your numbers in that area, in that moment in your business feels a lot bigger. So what I what I like to do or my approach is to break it down rather than looking at this really impressive goal of being almost a professional in the finance world. And
Mhm.
I can do this, and I'll show you all the certificates that I've done so that I can tell myself and others that I'm good at finances. I like to break it down into much smaller tasks and much smaller, maybe even mini projects. And then little by little,
Mhm.
as you know, we do one thing and then we get a little bit good at it, just a little bit.
Mhm.
And then we show up again and then we start to get better at that. And then suddenly you have done this for so long. And that's so long, it will look differently for everybody. It could be a week, it could be a month, it could be a year. So depending
Mhm.
on how you approach it and how often you show up and how often you try new things, and you might make mistakes and then show up and you do it again and again, then you start to realize this doesn't really feel that scary anymore. And I think
Mhm.
that is in that journey, but also in that moment of showing up that things don't feel so scary, that you actually give yourself the space and the permission in a way to, okay, now that I feel better here, let me pull this report and I'm going to try to see what it's telling me. Or
Mhm.
I'm going to have a conversation with my bookkeeper or my accountant and I'm going to ask them these questions. So, isn't that journey of breaking things down a little bit smaller to make it easier for yourself? First, initially to show up and
Mhm.
then to get a little bit deeper with the numbers, that you realize you can do this. You don't have to
Right.
be a professional
Right.
and if have a degree in accounting or anything like that. You can literally just do it.
Right, right. Yeah, and people have heard from me all the time over the years just the importance of knowing your numbers and keeping a pulse on the finances because
Yeah.
I've heard so many stories of where people have really kind of gotten themselves into the weeds with their with their accounting or their
Right.
bookkeeping and end up at the end of the year with a huge tax bill that they weren't expecting and all of those kinds of things, which are, yeah, yeah, it's so important. So, yeah, so kind of walk us through kind of your method of kind of helping people break things down and looking at their numbers and understanding all of that.
Yeah, one of the things that I really enjoy doing is creating that space to just talk. And I think a lot of therapists kind of are looking for that in their accounting professional, but maybe they don't find it often. And it could be just my personality. It could be because I like and understand the psychology of it, but I like to intentionally create my conversations and the way that I show up and kind of the plan that I put together for my clients for them to show up and be comfortable. So I kind of take two different components and I put them together. One is structure. I think it's important to have structure, especially in accounting, right? We want to have things
Mm-hmm.
organized and placed. We want to know where to put things together. But when you're coming without that experience, and many of my clients tell me, I don't even know what I don't know. Like I just literally, I don't have anything in place. For saying that out loud is it takes a
Mm-hmm.
lot of courage, especially as a business
Right.
owner. So instead of taking the approach of I can't believe you, I can't believe you don't
Mm-hmm.
have this in place, how come you have a business? It's okay, so let me show you the structure. I'm going to walk you through it, and I'm going to ask you questions, and I'm going to kind of prompt you. Today we're going to work on this, tomorrow we're going to work on that, then we're going to work on this. But then at the same time, the other component is that people are is what we're working with. We're not
Mm-hmm.
just machines. I'm not just this computer behind the screen, and I'm not expecting you to be either. So because we're both wanting to take ownership of the situation, we want to get better at what we're doing, I want that for you,
Mm-hmm.
then I create that space for you to be human. And if you make mistakes, it's okay. And if you have a question, I'm here to answer it. And I take that into consideration as well in the pace, because for some people, it might be extremely difficult. They might get really anxious. I remember one of my clients sharing in the very beginning, I don't want to have conversations that are longer than 20 minutes or 30 minutes, because usually we'll book 1 hour meetings. So she was open to tell me, let's just do 30 minutes. So I keep that in mind, and I have the structure that we're going to implement.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, every step is very intentional in what we're doing and what we want to achieve, having clarity with this is why this is important and why this matters to you and
Mm-hmm.
to your goals. But then also, not just like machines, this. We're going to have a conversation, talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that structure kind of serves as guardrails. Like we have a clear vision because we
Mm-hmm.
talked about it. We know what you want because we talked about it. So a lot of conversation, we know where you are because we talked about it. And also we have your numbers. So that's available
Right.
to us.
Uh-huh.
And then now bringing in the human part together, we walk through that together. So that's kind of
Right.
both components that I put together when I work
Right.
with my
Right.
clients.
Right. Yeah. So when you mention the structure, tell us more about how you like to structure things for people and what that looks like.
Yeah, that will depend, Gordon, on their practice. So
Mm-hmm.
if somebody is new and their goal, at least for the, foreseeable future, that's their plan, they're going to stay together. They might have a different tech stack that somebody that has a group practice and maybe has a couple of offices or,
Sure.
a team of W-2 employees. So part of
Mm-hmm.
my onboarding process is just to have, again, that conversation to understand what they're using and how they're using it and for what purpose. Because again, when we
Mm-hmm.
come at it not really understanding or knowing, we start grabbing resources from a lot of different people. And then we have this big list of, I have the spreadsheet over here and I have this app over here, but that one is not really fully complete. So then I'm also going to have this other one. And then I also have my personal app. So my
Mm-hmm.
personal finances app. So in the beginning, we kind of assess, okay, tell me what you have. And then in
Mm-hmm.
that process, we start, if needed, we start to make changes and simplifying it. So for your bookkeeping itself, we'll just stick to one system where we don't need extra spreadsheets and things like that to track your income and your revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll stick to one. Usually QuickBooks Online is the most common one, but
Mm-hmm.
there are other ones that do the same thing, right? And again, going
Mm-hmm.
back to where you are and where you want to go, maybe a free software could be a great fit if you're just a solo clinician and that's your goal. But if you have a group
Mm-hmm.
practice, I wouldn't suggest that, for example. I would suggest something that
Mm-hmm.
has a little bit more features to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then although billing and accounting has to be completely separate when it comes to a private practice because of HIPAA
Mm-hmm.
compliance,
Right.
and that falls under the category of billing, not really accounting or bookkeeping. I take that as part of your picture because I want to make sure that you're using that correctly, or that
Mm-hmm.
you're not correctly because I don't coach you on that, but you're using it. That's my goal with
Mm-hmm.
that. I want you to
Right.
charge all of your payments from your clients through your EHR, nothing that will come through the banking in the terms of like, Zelle or PayPal transactions or things like that. Everything will go
Mm-hmm.
through your EHR. And
Mm-hmm.
then we look at how are you doing with like, or how often are you looking at your financial report. So we kind of go through the course of the financial cycle and
Mm-hmm.
also looking at your calendar. So we know that every quarter we have to pay taxes. And the quarters from the IRS are a little bit different. So
Mm-hmm.
that comes to a surprise too. Okay, so we understand this is what you're doing. We have everything together. We're connecting all of your accounts, your credit cards, and all of that. We look at how you are receiving your payments. Is there anything that we can do to improve that? Okay, now we're going to look at the area of taxes. Are you prepared? Do you feel like you're prepared? Do you have surprise tax bills like you mentioned in the beginning? Why
Mm-hmm.
is that? So then usually that falls under the stage of looking at your financial reports and making informed decisions based on that. So based on all of that, we start using apps. And in my case, I use another app like a secure client portal to ask questions and share documents. So if you're working with a bookkeeper or an accountant, for example, I would really encourage you to never email anything. Always try, even if your accountant doesn't have a portal and you are using QuickBooks, you can actually share documents through QuickBooks so that you're not emailing anything. So little things like that. But when it comes to the actual accounting, it'll be just in one place. And then I'm also a certified Profit First professional. So another
Mm-hmm.
app that we
Mm-hmm.
can incorporate is the Profit First app where we again connect your bank and we look at percentages and things, but that'll be more of after the fact of the bookkeeping to get a little bit more detail in cash flow management and all of that. But like we said in the beginning, I like to keep things simplified. If there's something that I can do to remove, whether it's an email or a spreadsheet or something that'll be another thing on your list, that'll be my goal to make things simple, but also the most beneficial for you.
Right, right. Yeah, I've learned kind of the hard way over the years trying to when I've created these, big, different, complicated ways of tracking stuff, keeping it simple is yeah, yeah, you can end up doubling your work if you're not
Right.
careful. Hmm.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
not that they're not helpful because, of course, there is going to be information that you can pull from them. But like you
Hmm.
said, what what is the real benefit and what is your input. And also, you have
Mm-hmm.
to learn as you go and as you're building your business, you're going to start to realize that there's things that maybe you never knew or expected that you would like. So, if working and creating or getting new resources and spreadsheets actually make you like you feel like it's actually beneficial to you and it's helping you make decisions and you don't dread it and it doesn't give you anxiety and you're not
Mm-hmm.
missing out on weekends with your family because you're working on that, then that sounds like a great fit. But for
Right.
many other therapists, working on all of those things feels terrible.
Yeah.
All
Right.
the worst things ever just all combined in one thing. So if
Mm-hmm.
that is the case, then why are we going to make it harder for
Right.
ourselves to make it happen? It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be that way.
Right. Right. And yeah, you make a really good point, Andrea. I think you have to really kind of look at, the stuff you enjoy doing and also
Right.
versus the stuff that you dread doing. I'm one of those people where I enjoy messing around with QuickBooks and looking at the numbers, and so I keep that on my plate. But I would say if I
Right.
didn't enjoy it and it was confusing to me and all of that sort of thing, I would probably want to outsource that and have somebody else do it.
Right, exactly. Because we gotta remember, like, why are we doing this? If the
Hmm.
goal, you usually the first goal, right? Like, it's just gonna be compliance. If you have a
Hmm.
business, we gotta show our numbers to the IRS at the end of every year. We already know that. The thing is, as business owners, again, we have to, like you mentioned, you have to know your numbers.
Hmm.
And that doesn't just magically happen. We
Right.
just don't show up on the screen and things are explained in a way that we understand them, right? It's not
Hmm.
just the system itself, but it's also our input and how much time we spend looking at it and asking different questions and thinking about what if or now what and all of those things. So if you want your goal to be, I just want to have a spreadsheet to give it to my accountant, then you build it that way for that. I think
Uh-huh.
you're going to be missing out on so much throughout the whole year. And it's going to be a little bit harder to run your business that way. But
Hmm.
if that is your goal, then a simple spreadsheet will do. But if your goal is to, I want to understand this, I want to prepare for this, retirement, employees, payroll, summer, vacations, all of that, then I want to prepare and have all of my little components in my financial systems so that I
Hmm.
can get that information because we're not doing all of the tracking just for fun,
Right.
right? It's for the
Right.
benefit and information that that gives us.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I think too is, and you might want to speak to this a little bit as part of when we're bookkeeping and tracking our numbers and everything is looking at what is the why behind that. And I think one why is that we do have to for those of us in the United States, we do have to pay our taxes, and self-employment tax is much different than if you're employed by somebody, and
Yeah.
there's a few more layers to it as far as being able to keep up with that, and like you said, pay those quarterly tax payments and that kind of thing. But also looking at, what is it that you want for yourself in terms
Right.
of your own financial goals, saving for retirement, what do you need to live day in and day out? What sort of standard of living do you want to hold for yourself? And also, just all of the things that we do everybody does every single day as far as
Right.
buying groceries and paying rent and or mortgages and all of those kinds of things. You've got to know what that number is that you need each month.
Right, right. And it's really interesting coming from not having that in place, not tracking that in place, to now you have a business and you kind of have to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I see it as this really great opportunity to a new door opens to, wow, like exactly what you said. How much do I need to pay myself?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have those numbers clear on your personal finances, then it's kind of a forced invitation to
Mm-hmm.
look at that, because
Right.
you have to know how much you need to make every month in order for you to pay yourself what you need in order to then pay your personal bills. So it's kind of this journey or this cycle of, I need to know what's going on in my personal, have that very clear. And
Mm-hmm.
then because of that, this I can work kind of like backwards of how many clients I need to have and see
Mm-hmm.
every week. What about summer? How can I prepare for that? What about vacations, kids' birthday parties, if you have kids, and all the birthday parties and the gifts and all of that? I think it's a budget in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And retirement, and if what about college for my kids, paying my school debt, like all of these things, when you put it into practice and on the practical side of things, are going to come from your profit. So
Mm-hmm.
it's important to understand your P&L or your income statement, that you're going to have your revenue on the top. You're going to have all of the expenses in the middle that are going to be deductions for your business. And then the bottom line is the taxable income. So that's another incentive as to why we want to track things for our business, because that reduces essentially the dollar amount that is going to be taxed. But from
Mm-hmm.
there, usually the question is, well, I see my profit and loss and I see that this profit number is, whatever, 20,000, but I don't have that in my bank. How come?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where
All
did that
right.
money go? So
Mm-hmm.
it's from that amount that if you are not on payroll in your practice, you're going to pay yourself from that. So that takes, it's being taken out from that chunk. And then savings, we want to save money.
Mm-hmm.
So we take that from there. We want to save for taxes. I encourage all of my clients, save money for taxes as you go. We don't want to
Right.
freak out at the end of every quarter, like, oh my gosh, I have to
Exactly.
borrow from here. We're going to do it as we go. It's built into the system. So we
Mm-hmm.
take that from the bottom line and we're going to save for other little purposes here and there. And now I understand, oh, that is exactly where the money went. If you have debt for the business, that is where we're going to take that from. So
Mm-hmm.
that one number, it's telling you just one piece, like one area of the business, one story, but there's more chapters to it. And the goal is to put all of them together so that you can not only understand how good you have been at managing
Mm-hmm.
the cash of your business, and but
Right.
also a clear, in a way or method as to where I need to get better, or if
Yeah.
I want to do this and I want to have all of these goals over here. Now I'm more clear as to, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to go. I can start filling in the steps rather
Right.
than kind of being lost now and lost in the future. We are just
Right.
working.
Right. Yeah. And one thing you had mentioned was profit first, and I'm a big fan of profit first. And I, I think everybody in business should read Mike Michalowicz's book, but
Yeah.
also in our space, Julie Harris wrote a book, Profit First for Therapists, and
Yes.
she really breaks it down very specifically for therapists. And so, quick plug for those two books and
I
just
know. I love them. I have
that
them
sort of
right
thing.
here on my
Oh
table.
yeah. Oh yes. Yes. So, well, Andrea, I've got to be mindful of our time, and I'm so glad we had this conversation. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you and ways in which they can work with you and how you can help them.
Thank you so much, Gordon. Yes, you can reach me in two places mainly. If you're hanging out on LinkedIn, you can find me there. Just look up my name, Andrea Rotondo. And my website is liquidcensebookkeeping.com, cents as in coins.
Hmm.
You can find my services there. You can find a couple of resources, some free ones, some other resources that I have met through the years of working with therapists that I think are really, really helpful. So those will be there, as well as a way to contact me directly. So you can find my email there. If you have any questions, or if you want to jump on a coffee chat with me, I'm happy to meet you as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And we'll have links in the show notes and the show summary for people to access that easily. But Andrea, so glad to have you on the podcast and hope we'll have another conversation here soon.
Thank you so much, Gordon. It was great to be here.